So I'm going to talk about my year in review, and it's sort of, in a sense, the end of an academic year if you consider that it ends in October. But today's August 27th. But anyway, thinking about a year ago, August 27th, I had just come back from Europe after living there for almost a year, and I was just visiting, various parts of England, training around London a few times. Saw my cousin. Well, it was actually my grandfather's cousin's grandson who lives in London, and then I took a train up to Edinburgh, had Edinburgh, Scotland, and explored around there. Went to Stirling, Scotland as well, and I was living in Dalkeith in the beginning for a while. And then I had a good time. I had a great time. And then I went back to Amsterdam briefly, where I was living for almost a year. And then I came back to the U.S., spent some time here doing some tax miscellaneous stuff, preparing for my Boston University program. September 15th, my friend Bruno came over from the Netherlands to give a tax talk where I went to law school in the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we had a great time. We went out for dinners. We got some barbecue in Fort Worth, and then we went over to Dallas, got a great Japanese dinner in Dallas. And then, basically, it was big preparation time, constantly staying busy. I was also applying for Greek citizenship ever since August, basically, I'd say. Definitely heavy on the run in September. And I was making phone calls because I had to get my birth certificate. I was born in Florida, parents' marriage certificate, Illinois, and then there were some discrepancies. I had to get dad's birth certificate, and all this stuff going on. It took a lot of time, lots of phone calls. And then I was preparing for the same time to move to Boston. And then one thing, because I was starting my second tax LLM, I was doing a little bit online over here at the same time, while also spending some time with friends and exploring the Austin area, which is absolutely beautiful. And then I flew over to Boston. It was a great flight. I remember it was just fall. I was sitting next to someone who was talking to me about some older ladies were all together, and they were planning on going over to see the leaves changing color, which is absolutely beautiful in Boston. And I watched the latest Fast and the Furious movie with Charlize Theron. And then I flew over to Boston, got together, went to the tax program office, started taking classes, trying to meet as many people as possible. I remember shaking hands with as many people, trying to introduce myself. You got to be, I wouldn't say aggressively, but proactively networking. And then that first weekend, I actually went to Salem, Massachusetts, because I wanted to check it out. Took a train up there. By myself, and or was it the first weekend? And then I went down to Washington D.C. And then I went back up. I went 2 times in October to Salem. First on my own, and then I think that Friday. I think I went the weekend before, and then I went to D.C. and then I came back went to classes. I took a bus down to D.C. and then I came back Friday the 13th. I went there. Yeah, I think the first time was Friday the 13th, and then I went with my friend Bryce another time, and that was fantastic. I'm actually looking for photos, so I don't want to get the dates right. I did go October 13th. I guess that was the first time I went, because the first weekend, like October 7th, I went to D.C., and then the following weekend I went over to, with my friend Bryce, the weekend of the 21st to Salem. So the first weekend I went to D.C., second weekend I went over to Salem, and then the third weekend I also went over to Salem. Of course, I'm hanging out with friends. I met up with my friend Bryce, went over to the Harvard Club. I was hanging around Harvard a lot, as well as going to BU classes and networking as aggressively as possible. And then October 23rd, or 24th, I think I left on the 23rd, I got there on the 24th, I made it to Iceland. From Iceland, I go over to Amsterdam, and after spending I sort of had a long layover, 2 to 3 day layover in Iceland, then I went over to Amsterdam, where we were going to have our graduation. We had our graduation, then I went over to Rhodes to meet my attorney, which I flew via Athens. And then I stayed at a beautiful time in Rhodes, met my attorney, had a great time, drove around the island. And then I flew back to Athens, spent some time over there. And then saw the Parthenon, of course, saw some family and whatnot. And then I flew back. This all happened in a day. I flew over to Poland and I went over to Auschwitz, and then this all happened during the daytime because I left early from Athens. I remember waking up at 5 a.m., a lot of coffee, and I flew over to Iceland. Excuse me, I flew over to Poland, went over to Auschwitz. I just met some random backpackers basically on the plane right after the plane from Athens. They needed to get somewhere. I said, let's rent a car. You know, we all did it. It was all good. Indian students who were exchange students in Sweden but backpacking through Europe. I thought it was great. And we went out, and then I was racing back to catch my flight to go because I needed to connect to Amsterdam. See, there's a lot of layovers going on over here. And then I was racing back on the Polish highways because it was outside of Katowice Airport, and Auschwitz was kind of maybe an hour and a half drive away. But depending on traffic, there was a little bit of traffic. Got on the plane, flew back, just barely. I was the last person on the plane. Luckily, I didn't have any, it was just carry on. And I got back on the plane, landed in Amsterdam, tired, running all around, a little sweaty. Oh, well, maybe I smelt a bit. But, and then I saw my friend, Matt, who had just gone to his graduation for a different program, Masters of Business Strategy, MSc. And he and I met, and I re-entered the Schengen area. I have a stamp in my passport for leaving Schengen because he was flying back to London because he works at PwC London. And I flew. We went back and we met up outside of the Schengen area in Schiphol Airport. Gave him a hug. We took a photo together, and then I left. I met my friend Scott, who had been my mentor all throughout the Amsterdam, and even before the program in international tax law. We met up. We hung out. Had a great time in Amsterdam. Stayed a few extra. Canceled my flight from going back via Iceland because it was all sort of like individual flights I had set up with these layovers because I knew I could explore the areas. And then I flew over, after spending about 3-4 days in Amsterdam, I flew over to Baltimore because I got a flight from Amsterdam to Baltimore. From Baltimore, I had this whole rigmarole. I had to negotiate, meet people. I met up some random people, and we had a great, just met up some random people. We split an Uber fare, and then I ended up getting on the metro, taking it from the top northern, part of the D.C. area all the way down to the southern part of the metro to Northern Virginia. Stayed there a bit, went back up to Boston via bus towards mid-November by this point, because all this is happening. I was in Rhodes for Halloween. I was constantly traveling. There were times that seemed slow, just kind of walking around the medieval streets of Rhodes, so to speak. But then I flew back to, I went back to Boston, had another week of school, classes, catching up and everything, working as hard as I could, meeting up with friends, of course. And then from Boston, I went down for Thanksgiving. About a week spent over here. It was great. It was wonderful. And then that was a whole rigmarole too about how I did come, get down over here, trying to organize with friends and, managing the systems and everything. Trying to work out too as well because Boston University gave me a free membership at this huge Agganis Arena gym. And then from there, went back after a week, and basically it was finals time. Prepared about 2.5 weeks, give or take. About 2 weeks actually. No, not 2.5. It sort of ended around mid-December. So basically got back after that, and then I flew over to back to Austin. Had Christmas over here, and then I had New Year's with my dad in New Orleans. And then from New Orleans, I flew back to Austin, and then from Austin, I flew back to Boston. And the first weekend in January that I was back in Boston, I went over to New York, and then I went back to Virginia, and then from Virginia, I went back. So, all this is happening. I went back up to Boston, had a little bit of fun. It was sort of like the first weekend almost that I was in Boston. I wasn't studying for finals. It was that transitory weekend of January to February. I remember it. Just kind of hung out, had a lot of fun. A little crazy with friends. We went out to some bars, but 25 back then. I'm 26 as of 4 days. And then mid-February, I have this huge interview session that I've been preparing for a really long time called Terra Tax Accounting Recruiting Event. And I'd been preparing for it. I did a couple mock interviews with he was a great guy. at career services at the graduate tax program. I was asking as many questions, sending lots of emails. I had gotten 9 interviews in one day, so it was back to back. The first interview was with PwC, actually International Tax Services, the people I ended up being with, and that was actually very beautiful. I thought it was a cool interview. We talked about Hegel and stuff, and I had a whole bunch of interviews with Ernst & Young, because the night before, actually, we went to Ernst & Young at a networking event, so I went with them. And then after that, I got invited. This is when I met Amazon, Deloitte. I got the rose for the second invitation for the Deloitte interviews. And then I went to the KPMG. Well, first I went to either Deloitte. I think I went to Deloitte, the steakhouse, and then I went over to the PwC. They had a great view up on from Crystal City, and then I went over to the KPMG dinner. So there were all these events going on, and I basically went to a networking event for all Big Four firms, and it was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And then from there, I went over to I stayed a week in D.C. hanging out with friends and such. Got a great friend over there. Also hanging out with Cameron, going to museums a lot, but also staying with my classes and doing a lot of work. So I kind of balanced it out, working and hanging out as much as I could. And then I flew from there to San Francisco. Had a few great days in San Francisco, and then had to get my flight back because of my San Francisco interview, which I ended up getting an offer. I'm very thankful for. And then I flew back to Boston, had a bit of time there. The next weekend I flew out to Seattle. I was there for 4 days in Seattle. I think I was there 3 days in San Francisco. Great 4 days in Seattle. It was a great 3 days in San Francisco. I saw my old childhood neighbor that just used to live down the street over here, Rosanna. And I had a great time. Seattle, I visited Kurt Cobain's spot. I had a lot of time. My friend Denise, with her husband that I met in South Texas in the summer of 2014, came up. We sort of got reunited, had a great time, visited some museums and stuff, walked around town. It's a very walkable city, I'd say. And it was really beautiful. I had my interview with Amazon. Incredible place. I'm a big fan of Amazon. Possibly, maybe going back there in the future. The guys who interviewed me. All right, anyway, I went to saw the lake, the Puget Sound, and it was just really cool. And it was interesting. I've been watching part of Twin Peaks, and it's sort of it's definitely that scenery. I mean, you got all the the lake, the Puget to the west, and then where Kurt Cobain's house was on the Lake Washington. And then as I was going towards the airport, I could see Mount Rainier in the distance. Man, Seattle is just such a beautiful place. I just absolutely love it. I mean, so is San Francisco. I got to go to museums a lot in San Francisco as well. And then I flew back. I should also mention I was visiting museums in Boston as well. So museums in D.C., museums in San Francisco, museums in Seattle, and of course Boston. And when I went to New York, I went to the Met as well, which was awesome. And after that, I went over to, that was when I went to the first weekend of January back in Boston. That was when I went to the Mets, just to make things clear. And then basically, I had some free time. I flew over to New Orleans twice, once for Mardi Gras, and which may have been in between one of the interview flights, but once for Mardi Gras and once for Easter, and kind of spent the rest of the semester just hanging out. I remember thinking, wow, I haven't flown anywhere for a month. This is just incredible. And I took finals. Those went well. And actually, they went really well. And then I packed up my stuff about a week after graduation. I had the family come over to Boston. We walked around the Commons, took a lot of photos, walked around Harvard, took a lot of photos. Saw my dad's old, place that he used to live when he was doing his PhD at Harvard, and it's just so beautiful in the Commons, and it almost brings a tear to my eye. I mean, it was incredible. Boston Commons. We took some photos. Got a little rainy, and then Mom and Grandma got a little tired, because we were walking around a lot. We went up the hill, up the the Boston Gardens, taking photos everywhere. And then that wrapped up, and then I prepared to wrap up basically Boston. Moved out of my apartment, went down to Bethesda, and basically hunkered down and studied intensely for the bar exam. I went down to Virginia, and then I went back up to Bethesda because it was sort of the cheapest place I could find. And I hunkered down for the bar exam, studying nonstop. I mean, taking so much caffeine. I'm actually on a caffeine-free. I took the bar exam July 24th and July 25th. Now it's August 27th, and I've completely stopped. There's absolutely no caffeine. I was taking caffeine pills for the bar exam. It was just incredible, and I actually feel better. I mean, I realize I'm more tired. Get more tired easily, but and now I've basically spent a month intensely preparing. It's actually been a busy, kind of stressful time putting everything together. But ever since I came back, I've just kind of been preparing for the District of Columbia and trying to relax as much as I can, and getting some miscellaneous stuff, working on articles and publications on the side as well. So that's up this past year, up to August 27th. Think about it, just flying around, Iceland, let's basically start off in Edinburgh, August 2017, and then back to Austin, flying around, went up to Fort Worth and Dallas for a bit, and then flew all around Europe for a bit, and negotiating, meeting people, Iceland, meeting people on the plane, renting a car together. It was just great. It was a good time. So what a year. And here's to the next one, which is going to be busy and busy. And just trying to work as hard as I can, doing as much as I can to help people out, help the world out, but also publishing, spending time with family, which I think is important. And in the background, I'm kind of calling my mom, dad, and grandma every single day. I hardly ever miss a day. I'm kind of proud of that because I love them and I know things are limited. And this is Charlie, August 27th, 2018.